Next on Max TV, another edition from the Skybox. Mosley annihilates Margarito, and we go through news and notes. Coming up on the next round. And welcome to the next round. Steve Kim joined by Gabriel Montoya. We go over everything in the game of boxing. We begin round number one, where there was a sugar rush at the Staples Center in front of nearly 21,000 patrons for the WBA welterweight title of the world. Sugar Shane Mosley with a dominant performance, knocking out the Tijuana Tornado Antonio Margarito in 9 dominant rounds. Gabe, last week we said there'd be a 9th round knockout. We were absolutely correct. There was one problem. We got the winner absolutely wrong. I am stunned. I thought Shane Mosley turned back the clock and perhaps gave the best performance since his days as a lightweight.
Yeah, you almost would think that the Staples Center was a hyperbaric chamber. I mean, the guy was completely rejuvenated. I don't know about you, Steve, but I like my crow fire roasted with a little slice of humble pie on the side, a la mode. I couldn't have been more wrong about this matchup.
Yeah, you and many others, including myself, I'm more of a guy who likes it more well done. Here's the thing. I thought Shane Mosley's performance was brilliant in many ways. The game plan set by Nazim Richardson I thought was very simple. Number one, make this guy move his feet. Use your distance and hand speed. Also, time up on the inside and make sure that those sizzling overhand rights came early and often. And by the 5th and 6th rounds, you began to think and to know there was not going to be a Miguel Cotto-like turnaround in this fight. In fact, Antonio Margarito started to bend, I thought, all the way in the first round from a very good body shot with the right hand. But then by the middle rounds, those right hands over the top started to affect what we thought was an impenetrable chin of Antonio Margarito.
I thought two things that really set the tone also and set up the win was Sugar Shane actually had a hard jab for this fight. Normally he kind of pity-pats with it, kind of flicks it to blind you, to set you up for the right. But it was a hard, stiff jab. It was to the stomach. It was upstairs. And by the middle rounds, he was adding feints off of it to set up the right hand. And then he added in something that probably Richardson added in from his days with Bernard Hopkins. He was very physical with Antonio. He would tie him up in the inside, like you said. He would use his head a little bit in the early rounds, which was clearly bothering Margarito, and he'd throw in the shoulder a little bit, sometimes the elbow, was shoving him off of him. It was the most physical I'd ever seen somebody be with Margarito.
I think it's the first time in a very long time, if ever, when they met up in the center of the ring and they clinched at any point in that fight, that anytime Antonio Margarito tried to back up Shane Mosley, he was going up against a brick wall. Shane Mosley's physical strength was absolutely a factor, and I think it affected Antonio Margarito, that he couldn't shove him around like a shopping cart like he did to Miguel Cotto. What we learned here with our horrible prediction, Gabe, is 2 axioms that we can never forget. Number one, styles make fights. And when it comes to fighters like Shane Mosley, sometimes you have to completely discount the fight previous. The fight against Ricardo Mayorga, he looked like a guy on the edge. Couple of factors, though. Mayorga has a much different style. And number two, Shane Mosley has been pretty much a much better fighter at 147 than he is at 154.
Yeah, it definitely rejuvenated him to move back to a weight class that he's been really comfortable in over the years. And really, it was the speed that was the factor. I mean, if you took these two guys at their prime, you'd have to go with Shane Mosley 10 times out of 10. And that was kind of the mistake that I made looking at the fight. You didn't think that Shane would be able to turn back the clock the way he did. And he certainly did.
Well, conventional wisdom has been thrown right on its rear end for a 10 count. Everyone thought Pavlik would be too young for Hopkins. Everyone thought that Oscar De La Hoya would be simply too big for Manny Pacquiao. And you go back to this fight, everyone thought the youth and really the energy of Antonio Margarito would overwhelm Sugar Shane Mosley. Halfway through this fight, as it's 6-0 or 7-0 or 6-1 on the scorecards, I'm saying to myself, this is Hopkins Pavlik all over again. By the time that it ended in the 9th round, I said, well, this was Bernard Hopkins, Felix Trinidad.
Yeah, absolutely. Right down to the suspect hand wraps in the beginning of the fight, which we'll probably get into later. But yeah, this was actually just an absolute showcase of a master boxer. Really, in a sense, it was a master class of intelligent brawling. The way he was able to beat up Margarito, kind of burst to the side on angles and shoot to his body, something that nobody else has been able to do as of late.
I think if you take a look at it, that Shane Mosley said at the opening press conference, and he reiterated it after the fight, I'm the king of Cali. You know, not only is he the king of Cali when it comes to his colleagues like Margarito, Fernando Vargas, and Oscar De La Hoya, if you look at the history of Southern California boxing, just taking, let's say, the last 50 years, I don't think there's any doubt when you look at Gennaro Hernandez and guys like Carlos Palomino and many other good, solid fighters, I think Shane Mosley makes a very strong argument for being the best fighter this region has ever produced, Gabe.
Absolutely. You look at that statue of Oscar De La Hoya outside the Staples Centers, and you start to wonder, maybe they could just take that head off and put Shane's on it, considering he's the only fighter to ever fight twice there, and he actually wins at the Staples Center.
I think things have come full circle. In June 17th, 2000, he basically became a superstar by beating Oscar De La Hoya. Then, January 24th, 2009, he reascends to that position as one of the very elite fighters in the game today. Unfortunately, for every winner, there is a loser. And I really believe that Antonio Margarito has seen the last of his prime. I know it seems hasty at age 30. It may seem like I'm going on the bandwagon, but Gabe, I said this to you in the middle of the fight in the 5th and 6th rounds. It looks like there's a little bend in Margarito. I really believe this could be a case like Castillo Corrales, where everyone talked about the physical effect of Miguel Cotto and what he went through in terms of that meat grinder. I think it went both ways. The Antonio Margarito that showed up on July 24th of 2008 is not the same as the one that came into that ring.
Absolutely. I think it's not the years, but it's the mileage. And Antonio, being a professional fighter for half of his life with that grind-out style, where it's kind of face first and he'll take 5 to land his heavy 2, I think it's caught up with him. I think Saturday night we saw the price tag for his victory over Cotto.
You take a look at the style. The bane of a lot of Mexican fighters is the fast, athletic, black boxer fighter. And if you take a look at Margarito's history, going all the way back to his early losses, Larry Dixon, Rodney Jones, more recently Paul Williams, and now Shane Mosley. Obviously, he fits into that category of that Mexican fighter, certain physical limitations in speed and quickness that are going to give him problems, but I think this even goes beyond that. Like you said, it's a physical, hard-charging style, and I've always said it, and I'm a big Margarito guy. Once he hits the brick wall, that decline is not going to be gradual like it would be, let's say, a Vernon Forrest or a Winky Wright that could finesse their way through fights. To me, once Margarito goes off of that cliff, it's like Wile E. Coyote getting shoved off that ledge, and it's going to be fast. But here's the thing. This is not a perfect world. Even though he's made a lot of money, can live very comfortably the rest of his life, and this career is an absolute success. He started off 9-3 and made himself one of the most prominent names in boxing for a short while. There's no doubt in my mind, from what I'm told, Gabe, they are going to go through with that Cotto rematch in June. I believe this. I don't know how good of a fight it's going to be. We don't know what Cotto has. We're going to find out. But I really believe if he does not look good against Cotto and win that fight, I think he should call it a day.
That's hard to say. You know, a lot's going to depend on what Cotto looks like with Jennings. And like we had talked about earlier with Marquez Vasquez, maybe the deficiencies that they both have suffered from this loss, they'll be able to shore up when they fight each other again. And it might just be a matchup that's always going to be magic.
Well, think about this. Israel Vasquez, Rafael Marquez, to me, is another case of guys putting each other through the meat grinder who aren't ever really quite the same physically, but there's a difference. They kept fighting each other, so it was a little bit camouflaged. Looking at the situation with the hand wraps, folks, we really didn't know why this fight was taking so long to take place. I don't know that much about it. My theory is very simple. Let the commission do what they have to do in terms of its investigation. Let them make their ruling. And then I think at that point is when all the speculation and conjecture should really start to begin.
Absolutely. Although I think it is kind of strange and kind of coincidental that if you compare it to the Trinidad incident, these are two guys that came into the fight looking for an extra edge, allegedly, and then they go out and they get knocked out. I don't know if there's a coincidence there, but it sure seems strange.
Another key factor, the guy that was in the locker room both times, Nazim Richardson, who was becoming the best hired gun in boxing. Taking a look at the welterweight landscape, I think Margarito and Cotto, if they're going to take a big fight, maybe it should be against each other based on recent history. This is what I was told. HBO, if they had their druthers, they would love to do a Final Four tournament. Pacquiao-Hatton, which we'll talk about later, May 2nd, and they would love to put together a fight with Needs Money Mayweather and Sugar Shane Mosley. I think that would be intriguing. I think Mosley-Mayweather is a very, very interesting fight. I don't think Mayweather could hurt Shane Mosley. I don't think he's physically as strong. However, the caveat is this, the styles. The openings that were there against Antonio Margarito simply do not exist against Floyd Mayweather.
No, you're not going to see him landing repeated right hands and right hand leads and shots to the body off of on Mayweather. You know, it's just not going to happen. But I think the physicality, the intelligence, and the game planning of Nazim Richardson are going to shore up any of those deficiencies.
Absolutely. So there it is. Sugar Shane Mosley becomes the official king of California. We come back, we wrap it up with news and notes. Moving on with round number 2 of the next round, Steve, Kim, Gabriel Montoya talking boxing. We go on to news and notes. It is the return once again of Friday night fights. Herman Ngoju takes on Juan Urango in a junior welterweight bout featuring a pair of contenders. Here's what I think. I know that Ngoju has a home canvas advantage being in Canada, but I'll say this. If this fight is judged fairly on the up and up, I think Urango wins this fight.
You know, I have to disagree with you, Steve. I think that Ngoju is a solid boxer. He's a former Olympian. He's shown that he can hang with kind of speedy boxers like Malignaggi. He does just enough to lose, although arguably he won that fight. I think he can box around him and is able to stick and move on kind of the plodding Urango. He's got two-fisted power, he's a stalker, and he's a southpaw, which is always tricky. But he's really best when he catches you on the ropes or gets you in the corner. And I think Ngoju is going to be able to move around him and stick and move and make it ugly enough that he pulls out the win.
You know what? I have never liked Ngoju. I've always thought he was a very average, ordinary guy, very awkward style. Here's the thing about Urango. He has what I call Rocky Warriors-itis. He looks like he has a good offensive arsenal. He does have a good array of punches. He just doesn't do it enough. You're absolutely right. I think he runs the danger, especially being where he's at geography-wise, that he may have a lot of rounds stolen from him. But Urango is a big, strong guy. I think if there's a guy with power in this fight, it is absolutely Urango. I have a sense that he has to know this. If I'm his cornerman, I tell him, if you win 7 rounds in this atmosphere, you're going to lose 8-4. So make sure you try to blast them out. Just a hunch, though, I do think Urango has significantly more tools than Herman Ngoju. Taking a look at one big note here, taking a look at some tidbits, it is a done deal. May 2nd at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Yes, it is signed, sealed, and delivered. Manny Pacquiao, Ricky Hatton, and I'll say this right now. For as easy time as Manny Pacquiao had in December 6th against Oscar De La Hoya, I think he will have equally a difficult time in dealing with Ricky Hatton. Not saying he's not going to win, but I think this fight is much tougher than the Golden Boy.
Yeah, Hatton's is added a bit of like a sneaky jab that he uses to set up his power shots. He's a guy that digs to the body like few guys that Pacquiao has faced. Then you're going to have to deal with his strength. He's unbeaten at 140 and incredibly strong at that weight. I think he's going to be tying up Manny anytime he gets near. Manny's going to have to fight a damn near perfect fight to pull out this win.
I actually think this victory will be much more impressive in the context of where we really are in these careers than Oscar De La Hoya.
Absolutely.
Let's face it, Oscar De La Hoya was a guy who should not have been at 47, who really is a faded fighter, who hasn't been a full-time fighter for at least 6-7 years. Ricky Hatton, like you said, he is still the best junior welterweight in the world until someone knocks him off. I believe he's had about 40 fights at that weight class, has never really come close to losing. Here's what I think technically. You're right. I think Floyd Mayweather Sr. has done a very, very nice job of not changing Ricky Hatton, but adding a facet, the jab. Being able to close the gap, and that's the thing. Manny Pacquiao had things very comfortably from the mid-range, being able to shoot off his left hand against Oscar De La Hoya. One thing Hatton can do is become a wet blanket. He can close distance on you and really smother you, Gabe.
He absolutely knows how to cut off the ring and keep that pressure on. And it's going to be 2 elite fighters going at it at their best. I think Pacquiao is going to look fantastic at 140. We haven't quite seen him there yet, but he was basically there for the Diaz fight, about 146 on fight night, and then the same thing for the De La Hoya fight. He came in at 146. And I think that range is going to be great with his speed and power. I don't think it's going to look like Gotti Mayweather, but it might. But towards the later rounds, I think he's going to cut up Hatton, and I think it might start to be a speed bag or a heavy bag session.
Well, here's the thing. The thing that would worry me about Ricky Hatton is not even the last fight. I don't think Malignaggi brought much of an offensive threat. Let's face it, if he was playing baseball, it'd be a wiffle ball bat he swings. But Juan Lezcano, who has never been what I'd consider a heavy-handed fighter, significantly buzzed and hurt him twice. I'll say this, Freddie Roach will tell you, he's worked mitts with both men. The power and the speed and the accuracy of Manny Pacquiao, it really makes the power of Juan Lezcano really look almost, not to say amateurish level, but really pales in comparison. I think one of the things Manny Pacquiao has to be able to do is shoot off straight left hand comfortably within a certain range. I think Ricky Hatton has to muck and grind to make this fight really an ugly fight to a certain degree. I don't think he's ever really cared about how pretty he looked in the ring anyway, Gabe.
No, if there's ever a guy that had no problem stinking up the joint, it's Ricky Hatton. I think he's going to have to turn it into a brawl, an inside fight where there's a lot of wrestling, a lot of tying up, and Pacquiao's going to have to keep it a boxing match. He's going to have to use his boxing skill to set up the power shots off his speed. And we've seen with Hatton, he doesn't deal with speed well. I would say that Pacquiao is as close or as fast or faster than Mayweather, and Hatton wasn't able to deal with that at all.
And he's much more active in the punch output than Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather. Another factor is I think this was the right fight for both men. When Manny was waffling out there, I said, oh my God, not this again. I mean, just because you beat De La Hoya does not give you the same type of economic leverage as the Golden Boy. I think 50-50 based on what each guy brings in terms of their constituency is absolutely fair. And we talked about that little Final Four that the HBO would like to put together. I believe Manny Pacquiao's ideal weight is 140. I don't think if I'm Manny Pacquiao, especially if it's Shane Mosley, if he beats Mayweather, I look at the strength and the size factor and the fact that Shane still is very fast. If I'm Bob Arum, there is no way in the world, after what I saw this guy do to Antonio Margarito, I do not let a big, strong, fast, athletic welterweight take on a guy that really last year began his year at 130 pounds.
Yeah, absolutely no way would I make that matchup. No, it's not about height, it's about frame. And Sugar Shane packs everything he possibly can onto it. He looked fantastic at the weigh-in, he looked fantastic in the fight. I think he'd be way too much for Pacquiao.
Yeah, and before we wrap it up here, this past weekend, no matter who you were a fan of, Antonio Margarito or Shane Mosley, we're both LA guys. We've lived here basically our whole lives. You've come back. I tell you what, that was, I think, my favorite night in LA boxing history.
Yeah.
I just to have that type of atmosphere and to have this type of attention. I mean, for LA in the Staples Center to have the biggest event ever in terms of attendance, more than a Laker game, more than NHL playoff games or concert, it really shows you boxing is not dead, that if you do it the right way, this is still a very viable business.
Especially boxing isn't dead when you looked across over into Anaheim,
yeah,
and there was the big Affliction show with one of the number one, if not the number one MMA fighter in the world fighting, and they had to give away like half the house.
Yeah, and the atmosphere was unbelievable for this fight because I walked around just to see what everything was like. It was like a combination because of all the A-list stars, like a Laker game. But then with all the Chingasos and the fighting with the Vatos, it was like a Raider game. So it was like a Raider game and a Laker game all taking place at once. And I just want to say one thing. I think it's great that people show up. But folks, I don't understand you guys who pay your good hard-earned money to watch a fight and then you don't get to see a single second of the main event because you get into a fight. Let me tell you something, folks. Nobody comes to watch you guys fight. We want to see the participants in the ring, so let's just try to cool it a little bit. It's not that important.
Although, I don't know, maybe the undercard kind of drove him there because it was a little weak, I have to say.
And I think some of the fights in the crowd were more competitive than the main event. I will say that. All right, well, that's it for this week's show. On behalf of Steve, Kim, and Gabriel Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing, till the next round, goodbye, everybody.